Good morning, my fellow dirty gardeners. I'm Irene, the Dirty Dragon. I'm going to tell you a few things about how I go about doing general yard cleanup for the springtime. This was an idea suggested by somebody in the gardening group. So I'm going to walk through the garden and show you kind of where I start and where I finish, and a couple of key things to focus on when this time of the year comes around. Okay, let's go see. Probably the first thing I start with is cutting back all of the dead foliage from old growth last fall. And most of that is done for this year, so I can't show you that, but I'll cut it back to the ground and haul it away. With hellebores, you can cut back all the old dead leaves, not dead, but like gross leaves to showcase the flowers better. It's not necessary for all of them, but it does help prevent spreading of fungus. They like a lot of air movement, kind of like a rose. Pardon me, I inhaled part of my breakfast by mistake, so I'm going to be clearing my throat. Anyway, so yeah, you can cut back the leaves, and that's one of the things that's good to do at this time of the year. I would even do it earlier, probably in February. Just when they're starting to come up with the buds. This guy I've just kind of neglected to do because this one corner is not happening yet. The leaf litter, a lot of people think that it should be left, and there are pros and cons to both. Leaving it on the ground, number one, provides a place for insects. It'll be a home for them until they're ready to emerge. Now, for me personally, I do not like the way the leaf litter looks at this point. I usually clean it up around mid-March, and by then I think in our milder climate here in BC or Victoria, it's most insects are starting to come out anyway. A lot of people say that you should wait until probably consistently 10 degrees, and that's not till like mid-April here, which is when a lot of things are already like way up out of the ground. So I clear up the leaf litter. If you do decide to leave it, it actually makes a very good mulch as well, though. So it's not necessary to remove it. Another reason I do like to remove it, though, is that if I leave it, I miss a lot of the little ephemerals and such that I have. I've got a little tiny trillium right in here, and I think I stepped on it at one point. Oh, there it is, right there. And if I leave the leaf litter, I'd probably miss... This might actually be an erythronium, trout lily, not a trillium. Podophyllums, stuff like that are just emerging. I would probably miss a lot of them if I left the leaf litter. So that's one thing for removing the leaf litter. Okay, so epimedium flowers are pretty darn tiny, and they're on these little clusters that are almost impossible to see if there's leaf cover. So the leaves from last year, this is a really good time, March, to trim all the leaves if there's any left. Trim them all back so that you can start to see the flowers coming up, and then you'll be able to see them, and it'll showcase them much more, and it's just a much nicer presentation of the plant in general, because the new foliage is really nice as well. Hydrangeas. This is something that's a good idea at this time of the year to look at, because you can spot the dead wood a lot more easily before it's leafed out. So it's always beneficial to take dead branches off of a shrub of any kind. So yes, this is one that's not looking all that great right now. It seems to perform pretty well every year, but I always end up removing a lot of dead wood. So whatever, I guess it's happy enough. So yeah, any kind of shrub, go through, check for dead wood. The way that you can know if it's dead Obviously there's no leaf buds on it. Wait until you see the leaf buds before you start removing dead wood on shrubs, because it is sometimes harder to tell. A good indication though is when you can see there's a bit more color in the ones that are alive. And these ones here are kind of like a brittle pale color. This is for hydrangeas only, of course. If you are pruning a shrub and you're not sure, take a garden knife or something like that, and if you can't tell because there's no leaf buds or whatever, just scrape back a tiny bit of the bark, and that will, if it's green underneath, then it's still alive, and if it's brown, then it's dead. Over here I've been doing a ton of dividing and such, and so the other thing that I would recommend with cleanup is to put mulch down or top up the soil. In most cases I use composted horse manure. In fact, most of my beds are made with composted horse manure, not even soil at all. But obviously there's a lot of gaps in here, and I can see that the soil is getting a little bit thin. It's still very healthy, but you can see it's kind of gotten compacted down in the back here, and so I like to top all of this up with nice, rich, organic matter, compost, manure. Sand is good sometimes to break up the clay. Anything that you think, because right now you can get access to things before everything starts to come in. And it'll obviously feed everything during the growing season, so that's a good thing too. Roses. This looks really sad, and it's not. It just looks that way. But it's a good time of the year to prune them. They are starting to put out new growth now, so prune it to the shape that you want, the size that you want. If it's a long stem, you're going to be doing a little bit differently. You're going to cut it down to about 6 inches from the bottom. For these guys here, this is a miniature rose, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove probably about 1/3 from the top, just to even out the size of it, and I'll cut off all the old dead rose hips and dead wood. And it's actually going to be transplanted into the garden this year. But and then also feed your roses. This is a good time of year to do that, to start doing that, because as my friend taught me, roses are very hungry. So if there's just putting out a whole bunch of growth, then you want to give them food. Ferns, especially sword ferns, but really any kind that hasn't died off to the ground. Cut all the foliage back. In April, that's when all the new growth starts to come up, and it's so much nicer to look at if you clean up all the tatty stuff. And it's also a good time of year to divide them, which I will be doing soon. Oh my gosh, I smell something. Oh wow, these guys here, holy cow. Centiferous little beasties. Can smell them all the way across the yard. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, yeah, so grasses can be cut back and divided. When you cut back grasses, I will show you. Hang on a minute. This guy got a haircut not too long ago. Best way to do it, I've found, is grab a handful just like hair. And then if you have a gardening knife, just saw it off. And it's nice and clean that way. It's starting to put off new growth now, which is great. This one needs to be divided because it seems to be dying out in the middle, which is pretty common for a number of clumping grasses, because of course they grow outwards like this in a pattern like this to expand, and then this part dies off. So the best way to deal with that is just to divide it into quarters and then plant an outside section again. Which I will be doing soon, but this is a really tough plant, so I'm going to do a separate video about how I go about dividing tough plants like this guy here. But yeah, so grab a clump of it just like you're pulling hair, woohoo, and then cut that sucker off and just keep going. You can go right down to like 3 or 4 inches for most grasses. I remembered one other thing, and that is to remove foliage from evergreens that is damaged by seasonal botrytis, which is a fungus that affects a lot of things, especially if they've gotten wet over the winter. And it doesn't look very pretty. I'll show you what it looks like on my yucca here. And that's one more thing that you can do at this time of the year to clean things up. I'm just going to turn the camera around. Okay, so this is a yucca that's been kind of through the ringer. All of this here is basically just from winter's ravages. So I'm going to get rid of pretty much everything that isn't nice and fresh and green. Like these guys here are nice and clean. I'm going to get rid of all that. And it's not only on yuccas. You'll see foliage looking like this, like even on the hellebores that I showed you. They will have foliage that looks like this. I'll go back over there and show you. Okay, so we're back over at this hellebore again, which I haven't cut back. This is just seasonal damage. Nothing to be worried about. But you want to cut it off, and you don't want to put it in the compost because it's a fungal thing. So put it in the garbage or dispose of it with the city. And the city, they bake the hell out of their compost, so it'll kill off the fungus, no problem. So that's another thing that you can do is cut off any foliage that has botrytis on it from evergreen stuff. This is a miscanthus grass, and it's not pampas. It's not a pampas grass, it's a miscanthus grass. And it's getting a little bit rowdy, getting a little bit big. However, I discovered a few years ago that these lovely little feathery seeds here are taken by hummingbirds for their nests. So I leave these guys last. I'll probably clean it up in the next few days or so and divide the bunch, but I leave them to last to divide and cut down. Now, there's a really fun way of bringing down this grass and a number of other grasses as well. They actually benefit from being caught on fire. You burn them. Fire is awesome. I love it. So I have a blowtorch, and I'll probably just do a video about that later. But yeah, so get your blowtorch out if you're not like under something. I probably won't do it with this particular one, but if it's out in the open and, you know, it's a nice, cool, moist day, well, not wet, you don't want to do it in the rain because it won't light, but you know what I'm saying. Don't do it risky. That's what I'm saying. Don't be risky with it, but yeah, fire! Okay, so to recap, you cut off old, dead foliage from any plants, really, to the ground if they are herbaceous perennials, which means that they've gone dormant during the winter and the crown is where all the growth comes from. Cut all that foliage off and dispose of it. Fertilize your roses, your rhodos, your pieris, your hydrangeas, camellias, things like that. Check out your hydrangeas and other shrubs and remove old dead growth, and cut back your hellebore leaves and cut your epimediums to the ground so that you can get a nice show of the flowers. Remove the leaf litter, trim your grasses, give them a haircut, mulch your beds. Let me think here. I'm going to pause it for a second while I see if there's anything else that comes to mind. So removing botrytis, dividing, moving things around if you need to, relocating them, removing those friggin' little seedlings from the maples. Oh my god, those are nuts. Yeah, so those are all the things that you can do at this time of the year, usually from about late February into early April. Beyond that, you're pushing like a little late in the season to be doing cleanup just because everything is starting to come up again, and it's much harder to get into some of the spots that you want to get into and it becomes overwhelming because you have to do it faster. If you have a large garden like me, if you have a small garden, it's no problem. But I would panic if I ended up leaving it till really late, because there's just way too much going on in my garden for me to handle all that at the same time. So that's it. Good luck with your cleanup for the spring, and peace out, bitches.